How to be a priority and not an option. 4 powerful steps that work. Hey, I'm Jack. We're going to get straight into this question. And by the way, before we do, if you have a challenge in your life, maybe you're feeling stuck, maybe you're stuck on a guy and it's not going anywhere, or maybe you need some support to be a more authentic you, click the first link beneath this video and it will let you know how you can be involved in my world of coaching or my group program. So let's get right into this. How to be a priority and not an option. I know this is a common question because I've been asked it a lot over the years. And so if this is something that you're wrestling with, I've got some stuff that's going to work and will help you in this video. Make sure to stay until the end. So the first thing that you can do to make sure you're a priority and not just an option is to stop imagining there will be upgrades. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if you are looking to be a priority, you in your own self, your own orientation to reality, have to be sober about the fact that it's super rare to be upgraded from an option into a priority. Let me give you an analogy. If you want to stay in the suite at a hotel, it's super rare that you can book the lowest price room and that you miraculously get upgraded into a suite, right? Could it happen? Okay, maybe it's happened somewhere once. But any of us that are betting people would not bet on that happening, right? So what does this really mean for you? It means if you want to be a priority, that's what you've got to accept into your life. If you're in a connection where that's not happening, then be sober about it, right? If you're in something where it's casual or it's an option or there's not really a pursuing of a more real relationship, that's kind of what it is. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't stay connected to that person, right? Maybe there's some other thing for you to be. Maybe you're going to be great friends. Maybe you could be business partners. Maybe there's some other thing that could be available, but it's just for you to stop manipulating your own reality by thinking that something that's an option might become a priority. It's much better for you to set your stall out and stick to it than to imagine that reality is going to conform to it. The second thing that you can do to make sure that you are a priority is to be sober about what being a priority actually is. Right? So that phrase gets thrown around a lot. What specifically do you mean by that? Now, you don't need to come up with my definition of this. Really, I want to know what's true for you, but it's worth examining. So some people, by being a priority, what they mean is you are literally the highest priority in a man's life. Right? Now, that is possible. There are some men that make a relationship the highest priority in their life, right? Some men that are very oriented towards relationship, perhaps family, and it could be that it's right for you to go out and wait for, find, pursue that kind of man. For some people, what being a priority might mean is I have a number of priorities in my life, right? Perhaps career or mission is a strong priority, and perhaps being in a relationship is a strong priority for a guy, right? So there's a blended set of top priorities. That may also work for you, right? When typically I strip this down or examine it with people, what they really mean by being a priority, not an option, is I want committed, not casual. Right? I want something that's investable, where the guy's into it, where he shows up, where he attends to the relationship and he attends to me. And not where I have to fight really hard for his attention, and not where he goes off radar for a long period of time. Right? Of course I want him to have his career. Part of why I'm attracted to him is perhaps that he's successful or ambitious, or he's built something, or he's pursuing something that matters either to him or to the world, or to both those things. And I want that. But what I don't want is that he pursues that to the detriment of our relationship. And so you have to just be sober about what's in front of you. Some people are so ambitious, and this is not just men, about their career, that's always going to be a step and above their top priority, right? Of course, there are lots of instances of successful people who also really attend to relationship, right? But it's not that easy to have a super strong focus on your career and a super strong focus on a relationship. So I'm just inviting you to be sober about it. What you probably don't want to do is be kind of getting in the way of him aligning with his mission, right? Much better that you're aligned with that. What could that look like? Well, I like cycling. Right now, we're in Tour de France season, right? So if you watch the Tour, at the end of the Tour, and typically, at the moment, this is the men's Tour, a lot of them are being greeted by their girlfriends, right? Who are clearly into cycling and clearly into them trying to, win or compete or do well in the Tour de France. Right? So that might be a situation where you can be part of it, right? And maybe it's vice versa. Maybe there's something you're super passionate in and he can be part of. But what you probably don't want is a situation where you're constantly misaligned with how much energy he wants to put in his career, and you're kind of ruining the fact that that's his focus and that he's not focused on the connection, right? David Data said this about men. It's a pretty simple way of looking at it, and it's not only true of men, but men are like trains, right? So they're heading somewhere, right? Is this person heading to, a long and prolonged focus and putting priority in their career? Does that work for you? Some people don't want that. There's some people actually want a partner who's, works hard, holds down work, but is perhaps going to be available most of the time outside of like a 9 to 5, 9 to 6 when they're not at work. They don't actually want a partner who's taking calls on the weekend, who's putting in extra training on the weekend for their, professional cycling career. So work out what it means for you. And I think you have your right to your authentic definition of that. Be realistic about it, right? So we're not trying to look for some unicorn here. Like, be realistic about a definition that works for you and then stick to it. That's the most important part. Where people tend to get hurt in this territory is not actually because they're relating with a guy who doesn't put priority on them. It's because they're imagining that it should be something else, right? That they're in a castle in the sky, that they're in a fantasy, and they're not being willing to be sober about what's in front of them. If you were sober about it, you might say, oh wow, this guy, he works so much that he can't really even get together on the weekend in a way that feels good for me. I've just got to wish him well. That's unfortunate because there's so much that I love about him, but it's not going to serve me to be in relationship with him because that's going to be a constant source of friction. And if that's true on the front end, it's likely to be true ongoingly. So you don't want to be in the business of trying to persuade a guy to work less. You probably want to be in a business of, is this guy in broad alignment with where I would like a guy to have his energy and attention in his life? All right, number 3, building on that, is to actually be clear what his priorities are. Right? So this is kind of counterintuitive. If you want him to make you a priority, it's also being clear what his priorities are. And again, this comes to a question of alignment. Now, this works in both directions, right? So I'm not saying that he shouldn't know what your priorities are and know how to align with them. But in this instance, we're talking about how do you make sure that you're a priority to him by getting clear what his actual priorities are. Like, what is he really looking for in a relationship? Like, most people have multiple dimensions of self and they want to pursue those in relationship. But there's typically going to be one or a few things that are most important to them, right? Is he most looking for an adventure partner, right? Is he most looking for someone to build a family with? Is he most looking for a deep conversation partner, right? Is he most looking for someone that can stimulate and debate with him mentally, right? Is he most looking for a hobby enthusiast, right? Perhaps he's got this very niche hobby that really he would just love to geek out with his person on that. So getting clear what his actual priorities are and then working out, do you fit into that picture? And again, vice versa. That's going to save you a lot of time, energy, and pain, right? If really in the heart of hearts, he's looking for someone to geek out on this particular thing and you're just not that into it, maybe that's never going to align for you to be a priority, because if he's spending all his free time, gaming, and for you gaming is like you could care less, maybe that's not going to be a good partner, because also there's someone else that does care about gaming and would want to be up into the wee hours gaming, talking about gaming, doing all the things to do with gaming, right? So part of being clear about this is actually noticing what's in front of you and just digging into the detail a little bit and having the objectivity. This is the hard part, to really notice not what do you wish someone to be, but who is actually in front of you, what actually lights them up, what do they actually put their time and energy into, what is rewarding for them. Finding that kind of heat map and then noticing, is that a good fit for you? Of course, there's all sorts of accommodations and negotiations that can happen, but really we want those to be more around the edges than the meat and potatoes, right? Is the meat and potatoes of what this person's in. If this person is flying around the world delivering aid to low-income countries, do you care about that enough that when they do that and you can't join on a trip, or it means they're going to be away for an extended period of time, is that worth it for you? Right? Is that sacrifice in a sense to the in-person connectedness worth it because you get why they're doing about it and you care about it, right? If someone is pursuing, let's say like a high risk thing, like, I don't know, maybe they're a base jumper or a surfer or something that there's a real risk that you can get badly hurt. Does that align with you? Do you care enough about the pursuit of that, the freedom of it, or why they love it? Now, there can be instances where there's a thing where you're like, look, I don't care about this at all, but it kind of lights me up that they're lit up about it, right? So there can be, that sort of situation. But if this is really the meat and potatoes of their life, right? Not just, once in a while, I don't know, they love to go out and get completely drunk, right? I don't drink, but it's totally fine for me. I love that they do that. But, that's like a once in a while thing. Whereas if you don't care about drinking and every night of the week they want to go out and drink, that's probably not going to work for you, right? If you are cautious and safety oriented by nature and someone wants to go out and risk their life and you don't even really know why, because you don't get the thrill of the freedom and presence and aliveness that they experience doing that thing, that's probably not going to be a good fit for you. Do you see what I'm saying? In some ways, this is actually saying for you to be a priority, there has to be a minimum overlap of values between you. And when I say values, I don't only mean the sort of aspirational values that we have about ourselves, or a kind of self-identity values. Like I'm a courageous person, or I'm an ambitious person, or I'm a selfless person. But also, like, what are the values that, if you just looked at, let's say, the calendar of how someone spends their time, energy, and attention, like, what are they actually putting it into, right? Are they most trying to create something in their life? Are they most trying to conserve what it is that they have in their life? Are they most oriented towards feeling safe? Are they most oriented towards feeling alive? In a relationship, do they most want a friendship? Do they most want, a live chemistry? Do they most want a stable partner? Do they want all those things? But even when we want all those things, often there's going to be one or two things that kind of most draw on our attention, or we most notice if they're not in place, right? So again, for you to be a priority, you need to be clear what are their priorities and your own, and how much of a natural affinity are there between those things, right? Otherwise, you're always likely to be pushing something uphill. And again, for clarity, I'm not saying that you need to shapeshift into this person's priorities, right? If you know that that's your tendency, is to lose yourself in relationship, to give up your own priorities, to just go along to get along, to kind of get into someone else's slipstream and forget yourself, I'm absolutely not saying do that, right? Your journey is going to be more authentically to stand for your own needs and power and what it is that you want. I'm just saying, like, if you love to be on the road 6 months of the year, is this person going to be aligned with that or not, right? So it's like, before you get in too deeply, it's having the sobriety to notice is what they're. Said differently, do your love languages kind of align? Like, what is this person's love language, right? And is it one that you can keep depositing into? And again, vice versa. But at the moment, we're setting up the video to talk in this direction. So if their love language is quality time and you don't have that as a love language, it might be hard for them to make you a priority, right? Because the thing that they're most going to be wanting to do isn't something that shows up as I'm a priority in your love languages. You get what I'm going with this? All right. So the fourth thing that you can do to be a priority, not an option, is to look at the math, right? Or maths, where I come from. So why am I saying look at the math? So this is a simple way of thinking about how can you objectively look at the connection between you, right? And one way that you could look at the connection between you is to plot the entire thing on a graph. And so there's two things that we're looking for on the graph. One is the frequency or cadence that you get together, right? So, okay, we get together here, we get together here. And I'm going to say get together is some kind of in-person interaction, or if not in person, it's like a meaningful interaction, right? Like, it's not just a 2-minute call, it's like a drop-in call, right? So if we were looking at those on a graph, like, how often are they happening? What's the gap in between? Does it work for you, right? And then the other thing that we would be looking for is kind of like, what's the length of that interaction, right? So is it a 30-minute phone call? Is it that we went away for a weekend trip? So you can just imagine almost like a Morse code, right? Dot, dash, dash, dot, dash, dash. And then if we just put them aside and we looked at you, and we said, okay, over the last 30, 90 days, this is the graph. Does that have you feel like a priority, right? Because that's probably the best data that we have currently about how this person wants to relate with you. And again, barring any kind of gross structural constraints, right? That they're not, working away on an oil rig, or they're not taking care of a sick mother, or, something that's unusual, or that's just a constraint that you're going to either have to work with or not. But let's just imagine at the moment it's not too hard for you to get together. We're not in a pandemic. We're not on an oil rig. What does that look like? Does that graph work for you to have you feel like a priority? Or is the combination of dots and dashes one where you actually feel like an option rather than a priority, right? And you're probably intuitively going to be aware of what's true for this. And by the way, it doesn't really matter what's true for someone else. It really matters what's true for you, right? If you've got super unrealistic expectations, like you want to spend every moment of every day together, you might find someone that wants to do that with you, but mostly you're probably not. Certainly a man that's a little bit more on his masculine is probably not going to want to spend every moment of every day with you. So, okay, if you've got some potentially unrealistic expectations, check them out, get a coach or therapist, check them out. But assuming that is not the case, then have a look at that and then see, do you like the math, right? Now that might sound like a very unsexy, pseudo-scientific, I'm not saying this is actual real science or actual real math, right? But there are dimensions to how often do we get together, that we can look at in a more objective way. That's what I'm inviting you to do, right? I'm inviting your sobriety and objectivity. So you're not carried away in the idea, the fantasy, the story of what this could be. You're actually looking at the data and you're saying, hang on a minute, well, here's what I notice. One pattern I might notice is we used to get together more in the past, right? Another pattern you might notice is we got together more frequently, and now it's gradually, those dots and dashes, they're becoming further apart. And that's not because I want that. That's actually because he's making himself less available, or he's making connecting with me less a priority, right? So any time without some good reason or one of those structural constraints that we're seeing the math is going down, right? So less frequency or less duration of each time we're together, that should be a question mark to you, and that might be a potential red flag, right? Why is it going that way? If it's just the natural cadence that he wants to connect with you is not going to be a priority, right? Making you a priority, you have to see that, right? Sometimes a guy might say, look, I notice I'm not making this a priority, and so I think we shouldn't connect more because I notice you want a real relationship and I'm not available to that. But quite often a guy's not going to do that. It's actually going to be on you to claim what you want and to see what's in front of you and to name it as such, right? Mostly I'm in the orientation here that your job is not to take a guy that's making you an option and teach him to make you a priority. I don't think you want to be in that game in business, right? The vast majority of the time you want to be in the business of noticing what is the cadence, what is in front of me, how much does he want to relate with me, and does that work for me, right? And then staying clear on what it is that you want. So really, it's not about you making him make you a priority. It's about him making you a priority. Do you show up in life? Do you occur to him? Does the energetic connection between you, does the way that you guys pitch, catch, relate, does the attraction, does everything that goes into it, does it have him want to make you a priority? It's like, is he at a stage in his life where it even makes sense for that? Right? Is he a stage in his life where he's saying, yeah, relationship's a priority? At many stages, and this isn't just an age thing, this is also a, just season of life, season of past relationship. Is a guy available for something? And if he's not, then you sometimes have to be that sober, objective voice to yourself. Getting out of the persuasion business. In a sense, I'm saying get out of the persuasion business and be a little bit more scientific about it. See if you can see what's in front of you, because I think that's going to be the fastest path to you having the priority, and that's that felt sense of this matters and I'm important to him that you want and you ultimately deserve. So let's get you more of it. Listen, if you want me to help with your situation, perhaps you're stuck on a guy where this isn't a priority, click the first link beneath this video. I can help you let go of something that's not serving you. Or if you know that there's a domain in your life that you want to be more yourself, right? You want to feel more alive, empowered, clear on who you are and what it is that you're about, then also click that link because I can help you with this. Let's get you some support. As always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here. Take care.